as we abruptly slam the brakes on that banger of a song that I got off of, I think, SoundCloud.com. I'm still congested. Me and my wife are recovering from the flu. I promised my wife I would make this joke this week. While I am returning from the flu, Jack is returning from Flu-ta. Oh, Utah. There you go. There's my browning points. That'll keep me off the couch for a couple weeks. Jack, you're back from Utah. We got a week off. We're coming back tonight. We're doing a full 7-round Minnesota Vikings mock draft. We're going to try and go through it kind of quickly to not eat up everybody's time. I know me and you could do one 7-round mock draft. We could milk the thing for 6 hours worth of content. We're not going to, I promise. But Jack, you're back. You're in your home state of Minnesota. It's been 2 weeks. How have you been? How was your vacation? And the floor is yours. It's high. Right. Yeah, and I think it might be a situation where, and we can obviously get into it really quickly. I do want to, I'm just going to tease it. I can't officially announce anything. I told Jack about it before the show. There's going to be a big announcement next week at a Load the Box, something that I'm really excited about. I think Jack is excited about. And also the Load the Box Bounds guys, the whole Load the Box family is going to be pretty excited about it. We're excited for what it means moving forward, blah, 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 all that, mumbo jumbo. But that announcement will be next week on the show before we do what will probably, it won't be the final mock, no, because there will be one the Thursday before, right? So it'll be the second to it'll be the second to last mock draft next week. But big news coming there. And also, before we keep talking Viking stuff, mandatory, have to get it in. Make sure you're following us on Twitter. Make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel, and make sure you have liked the Facebook page and you're following that. All the ways you can get the show. Into your life, and you can hear mine and Jack's wonderful Vikings takes, and you can hear me know absolutely nothing about the wide receiver position. But now we can get into this mock draft and we can talk about that. It really feels like trade down is the obvious option, and I think we do this every year where we want to trade down, but especially with we're not moving up to get a quarterback. The two best corners in the draft, I would argue there's a gap between 2 and 3 here. I think that the two guys, you can kind of make a case for either one, and then it's a significant gap, and then you get into your Trent McDuffie's, your Andrew Booths, and the like. So it feels like a trade down situation before we even see what the draft board looks like. But I'm interested, and I want to get this because this is going to be a new recurring segment, I think. I want to get your opinion on a guy like Trent McDuffie. And I know we've went over him before, but how much does the arm length actually concern you? Because to me, it's almost a blacklist the guy, don't touch him, because whenever you're on a list with that many guys, I do think there is a little bit of merit to you're just not long enough to play the position at an elite level. What's your opinion on him?
There's people that have called it McDuffie Island for Washington. So I don't know. I think my top 4 cornerbacks, we've already talked about all 4 now. I think Sauce Gardner is 1, and then Derek Stingley is 2. But I think that gap is pretty close. We were kind of texting about that earlier this week, where it's I think Sauce Gardner is the safest pick at the cornerback position, but I wouldn't be shocked if we're having this conversation 3 years down the road, and Derek Stingley is the one that was kind of crowned the best cornerback out of this draft class. That still, obviously, there's a lot of football to be played between the two. And then after that, I think it's a little bit of a toss-up for me between Andrew Booth and Trent McDuffie. I like Andrew Booth, too. He's extremely physical. I don't think he's as polished as McDuffie. I think McDuffie would come in and be they both have a good chance of being a day one starter on this team unless Cameron Dantzler ascends and takes that next step into year 3. But I wouldn't be opposed with the Vikings taking either McDuffie or Andrew Booth, but I think that slides back to what we were saying before that. That's prime trade down category or prime trade down. I don't know the word I'm looking for now for some reason, but it's
Territory?
right there. Yes, territory. Thank you. I don't know
gotcha.
why I spaced right there, but I don't think I would take McDuffie or Booth at 12, but I think if you slide down a little bit and you get into the late teens, early 20s, I'd be more than fine with taking either of the two, especially if it either gets you another first round pick next year or an additional second round draft pick in this year's class.
Yeah, I think I can vibe with that big time, and it will be interesting to see what Kwesi's vision is and what his strategy is going into this draft. This is obviously his first draft as the Minnesota Vikings GM, as a GM for an NFL team. So I think if we trade back and it doesn't result in a bunch of picks this year and it ends up netting us picks in next year's draft, specifically if we trade back and get a 1 in next year's draft, I do think you're going to hear people, specifically me and, the Kirk Cousins guys that just, he's our favorite quarterback. I do think you're going to hear us start clamoring a little bit about like, oh, maybe he did that so we have the ammunition to move up and get a guy next year in the draft because next year's quarterback class is going to be it is expected to be much deeper than this one is. Apologies, by the way, and thanks to Chris Land, who says, what's up? Chris, good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. We had some technical difficulties. I got cocky and forgot to do a sound check. We couldn't hear Jack for the beginning of the show. We did fix it at the very beginning of the Trent McDuffie take, but unfortunately, Jack, we missed the Utah story. And it was epic and it was crazy, but it's probably for the best because it sounded illegal. And I think you incriminated yourself a lot. So let's count our blessings here. But Jack, if you are ready, I am ready to get into a mock draft. We're doing a full 7 round. We have we're doing it on the Draft Network. Honestly, I need to write them a letter and tell them that they need to sponsor us because we've been using the Draft Network very loyally for like 3 seasons now. And I stick to them, but we're going with the Draft Network, 7 rounds on fast. I have to do a little bit of setup here, not much. I just have to click that, do that, click that, and bam. Oh, I almost had it. Oh my gosh, I was so close to hitting the perfect game, and I missed it at the last second. Missed the buzzer beater. Okay, so this is our new little format that we got. There's the draft above us. Jack, you are still on camera. They can see you. You're just very, very tiny on the bottom of the screen. But we are visible for this, so the Vikings are sitting at pick 12. Of course, there's been some moving and shaking in the first round. The Saints now have 2 first-round picks. I think that eliminates them as a trade-back candidate, unfortunately. But we will see what happens. So if you're ready, let's go ahead and kick this bad boy off. Malik Willis went 2. That was a very notable I don't want to say that was a very notable oddity about our first mock draft. No quarterbacks were taken until I think the second round. I think Malik Willis didn't go until...
it was something crazy like that. I remember
and
that.
you look at how this one falls, and Malik Willis goes to the Lions. Sauce Gardner does go to Seattle, who, I mean, they could even, in theory, be taking another quarterback. You could see Malik Willis go, and then you could see this be Kenny Pickett. We're not going to spend a ton of time here, because I think this is obvious the way the draft board has fallen. Derek Stingley is there. Do we trade down or do we keep him in purple and gold, bring him in, and just become the LSU Vikings like we're destined to be?
I think I'm starting to lean that way more and more. And I would be 100% okay with the trade back if Derek Stingley isn't available right here. Another name that I wanted to bring up is Kyle Hamilton, because I just saw a tweet right before we hopped into the show that a lot of teams are starting to have him slide outside of the top 10 on their big boards. If in any way, shape, or form Kyle Hamilton falls to the Vikings, they need to sprint that ticket to the podium and
Absolutely.
not even second guess themselves. You get two starting Notre Dame safeties with him and Harrison Smith, and it can become the Notre Dame Vikings when they re-sign Kyle Rudolph in a couple months as well. That is
Oh yeah.
complete sarcasm for that. For those who that did not register. I'm rusty. I apologize. It's been a while since I've done this. So I think Derek Stingley is the pick here. It just makes a ton of sense. His cornerbacks coach for LSU is now the cornerbacks coach for the Vikings. You have Patrick Peterson here to kind of take him under his wing. I think it makes a ton of sense, and it fills arguably the biggest hole on this current roster.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I'm going to go ahead and pause it at the very end of the first round. I'm not going to go pick by pick. I am just looking to see kind of what happened, and so you can see it as well. We went with Derek Stingley Jr. It was an easy pick, I think. You know, he has the potential. I would say, in my opinion, and this is me, I think Sauce Gardner, again, I live in Cincinnati, so take it with a grain of salt. Sauce Gardner's flow is higher than Stingley. I think Stingley does probably have the highest ceiling in this class, and that's just because you look at the level of competition he played against that season he had his freshman year. I think Stingley, if he gets to 12, is just too obvious of a pick. We look at who's left. If by some miracle Nakobe Dean falls to the Vikings, I won't ask your opinion. I will just make the pick and then make you talk about it. He's probably my second or third favorite player in this draft class. I just think he's so Butt Coleman, friend of the show, made a video on him saying he's not a hammer, he's a scalpel. He's just as dangerous. You can cut people just as good as you can hit them with a hammer over the head. Like Nakobe Dean is, I think he's going to be really, really good in the NFL. But looking at the board, I'm trying to anybody on here that you want to speak on before we move on. There goes Olave to the Packers.
Look at that. Somebody does agree with me about Daxton Hill in the early 20s in this scenario, at least that's a great fit for him, I feel like, going to New England. But I like Daxton Hill. I think he's going to be really good at the next level. Chris Olave is someone that both Jordan and myself have been drooling over via text a little bit, if you will. We both are pretty high on him, and I don't think either of us would like to see him go to Green Bay and fill the shoes of Devontae Adams. I think he could do wonders with Aaron Rodgers, and that would be kind of scary. And I think they'd probably address that position another time again at some point in the draft.
Absolutely. I think that it would be fitting after all of the love that I've given Chris Olave, via text. Is here recently we've really been talking about wide receiver, and I've been talking about how much I like Olave and how I really liked him at the beginning of the year, and then he kind of took a backseat to Garrett Wilson out of Ohio State, and I still love Chris Olave. I think he's going to be an excellent player. So similar to Jordan Love, who I stood on the table for and pounded the table and said he was going to be great. And then the Packers took him, and Jack on the show made fun of me and said, oh, well, you can't like him anymore because he's a Green Bay Packer, and it really broke my heart. But we'll go ahead. We'll kick off the second round here. There's one guy who I'm going to talk about who I'm assuming is going to be here at pick 46, and he is. This is a guy who I don't think is getting hyped up enough, and I think his small school stature is why. But Tariq Woolen, to me, has every unteachable thing that you can have in a guy. And with a little bit of coaching, I do think he could develop into an elite level corner in the NFL. Just the size, the speed, the length, it all the physical tools. That was what I was trying to get to. All the physical tools are there for him to be a really good player. If we would have traded down and went with maybe safety, or maybe we moved down and got an edge, I would have been banging the table here for Tariq Woolen to be our pick in the second round. Matt Corral is a guy that I know you like. I don't think we're going quarterback this early in the draft. I might take Bailey Zappi in the 6th, but we'll see how this all plays out. But what are some names that are jumping out at you here as I kind of slowly scroll down the board? A lot of running backs. I don't think we're going there, but what's on your mind?
This is actually kind of a weird spot for the draft because I've said this several times already. I do think the sweet spot of this draft is somewhere within the back half of the first round and into the early like first 15, 16 picks of the third round. So I think we're right in that sweet spot of this draft class. But I wouldn't be opposed. I don't know if any trades popped up here or if we could look at something. This is prime trade back territory as well. I don't know. Wouldn't be mad with Quay Walker. I wouldn't be mad with DeMarvin Leal. I cannot speak speak today. And then I wouldn't be mad with another wide receiver that both you and I like, George Pickens. I think this is territory where you could see the Vikings potentially surprise some people. I think, again, if the Vikings were to trade back on day one, I certainly think wide receivers in play there as well with a guy like Chris Olave if he is still on the board. So right now would prefer to kind of slide back and try to recoup a third or fourth round pick. I don't know if there's any teams that are be willing to do that. I think it's
let's try and trade with the Cowboys because they seem like idiots. And I like is that okay? Can we try and move back to 56?
I'd be more like even if you just recoup like a fourth round pick out of them somehow. For that Chris Herndon trade, which was so fabulous.
Well, they're probably not going to give us that. What if we throw them one of our 3/6? Does that seem fair? Let's give them the middle one. Does that seem fair? We'll give them a 2 and a 6. They give us their 2 and a 4, and you know they get the pleasure of moving up, and they get a 6th round pick to go and get somebody. I'll go ahead and submit that. Let's see. One thing I'll say about the Draft Network, I rarely get rejected, but I also usually load up my picks with. I don't think we're moving up after we just traded back. So I'm just going to decline these calls. All right, so here we sit at 56, and George Pickens actually just went the pick before us, which is a little ironic. I don't think we talked a lot about Sam Howell, and I know we're not taking a quarterback, but Sam Howell is a guy who I like him probably more than I should. Everything in me says not to like him, but I do enjoy him. But what names are jumping out at you here? Dylan Parham is a name that I like to grab. If I do get a late second round pick, kind of a mid-late second round pick, just because he is, a piece on the interior of the offensive line. I think he has potential to be good. But what are you thinking here?
Yeah, my philosophy, and we've had this conversation over and over again, I don't think there's ever a bad time to draft a quarterback. And right now, if you're sitting here and you're Kwesi and a guy like Matt Corral is looking in the face, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I don't think that's the direction that they're going to go. Ideally, in an ideal world, one of the pass rushers or one of the safeties like Bursker out of Penn State, Jalen Petre, one of them in an ideal world would fall to the Vikings at 46. That didn't happen. That's why I think we wanted to trade back. But who's up at the top? Chad Muma's a guy that I really like too, and I think the linebacking depth for this team is a lot more of an issue than people realize. I know they brought the guy in from Arizona. They still have Kendricks. And it's going to be a whole new scheme. But Chad Muma's a guy. He has the athletic profile. He's very good, strong tackler. I know he played a little bit different style of football playing at the University of Wyoming. But I wouldn't hate that because both Kendricks and Hicks now, I think Kendricks is approaching his 30s if he's not already 30. And I think Hicks is 28, 29. And we haven't seen anything really out of Chaz Surratt, Troy Dye, some of these younger guys that were drafted in third, fourth rounds over the last couple of seasons. We just haven't seen enough out of them, and I still think they're a little bit undersized to play in this defense. I definitely wouldn't be opposed doing that route. I was kind of hoping that either Leo or George Pickens would fall, and of course they both went in the last 3 picks before this. But I think I'm an open book. I wouldn't be opposed with Quay Walker either. I didn't realize he was still on the board. It's crazy that every single player in that Georgia defense, I think, has a chance of getting drafted this year. But he's another one that I'd probably take him over Muma, honestly.
Right. If we're gonna go linebacker, I do think Quay Walker is the pick here.
I didn't realize he was there. Still.
I do want to, and I'm not gonna false anything on anybody here, but I do want to point out the possibility that Irv Smith Jr., as good of a camp as he had, he is coming off of an injury, and he hasn't shown really the sparks of the elite levels yet. I'm not saying he can't. I'm not saying he's a bust. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying, he was behind Kyle Rudolph, and then he was behind Kyle Rudolph again, and then he got hurt whenever it was supposed to be his big year. With Trey McBride here, it's interesting to me, and that's all I'll say. I'll kind of leave it there. I do think that I don't want to do it here because, I think if Quay Walker's on the board, then he's an obvious selection here. He's just too valuable to pass up. But these tight ends, I really like, and, I don't think it's likely, but I do like Isaiah Likely out of Coastal Carolina. That might just be because who doesn't love Coastal Carolina? But I'm going to go ahead and pull the trigger on Quay Walker. We're going to let this second round play out. I'm going to decline this because I don't think we're going to move up. Matt Corral is having an awful draft weekend so far, by the way. Do you want me to like even take any of these?
No, that's fine.
I didn't
We can
think
just
so.
chill at 77.
I didn't think we were moving up. And Matt Corral
There
just
goes
went.
Matt Corral.
Sam Howell is still there, and that's if the Vikings got Sam Howell in the third round, I would not be upset. I'd be like, oh, you know, well, we just took a linebacker, so we can't take Darian Beavers, but you know, UC. Go. I almost just said go Buckeyes, and my wife would have killed me. Go Bearcats. Drake Jackson is a name just that pops out to me here. I like him out of USC. I do think he has a. We're getting it now. We're in the third round, right? And now we're starting to get from this guy could be a starter on day one that can contribute at a very high level into like this guy could do that, but he also needs some development. We're kind of starting to get into those middle round guys that you hope pan out and turn into your Danielle Hunters. But they could also be the guys that don't really go anywhere and they fizzle out. And I'm having trouble coming up with names for that because most of the guys that do that, you know, they fizzled out and they didn't last very long. So Drake Jackson does stand out to me. I feel a little odd that we haven't went with any offensive picks yet, but the offense, I don't want to say it's set, but like, I mean, the defense is really what needs help, and the draft is a hell of a way to fix it.
I do think I prefer Nick Bonito a little bit over Drake Jackson as well, the kid from Oklahoma, both pass rushers. I don't think it could hurt. I know the Vikings went out and they got Za'Darius Smith. They have Danielle Hunter tied up for another 2 years, I believe. I don't think adding more pass rushers to Ed Donatel's defense would be a bad move, whether that's on the interior, if it's going to be one of the defensive ends on that three-man front, or if it's going to be more of an outside linebacker that can kind of sit and learn behind Danielle Hunter and Za'Darius Smith. I think at some point in this draft, there's going to be an edge rusher and probably an interior defensive lineman taken. I don't know if that's going to be in the third round or not, but I wouldn't be opposed to either Drake Jackson, or Nick Bonito. And your guy Isaiah Likely is still here as well. And another tight end that I also like is Greg Dulcich out of UCLA. So I wouldn't be opposed to doing that. I don't know if the Vikings see tight end as much of a need.
I don't think
kind
it
of
is.
overhauling that defense. So I wouldn't. I think one of those pass rushers is the route that I would go at this point.
I'm gonna go with Drake Jackson, and it's strictly because I'm selfish. And also I was afraid you were gonna make me take Matt Corral earlier, and I wasn't gonna be able to tell you no, and I was gonna be like, really? Like in the second round, we're taking Matt Corral? What are we doing here? But I mean, Isaiah Likely just went. Dulcich is about to go. Yeah, we're starting to get into that point now. So in real life, the Vikings will not have this fourth round pick we're about to have, but we did move back in the second. We got the Cowboys pick. I'm not trading with you, New England. Leave me alone. And now here we sit. And I'm looking, let's look at who we've picked so far, by the way. So we've gotten Derek Stingley Jr., we've gotten Quay Walker. I think those are two guys that could step in day one and really have quite an impact. And then Drake Jackson, just a middle round edge. Everybody's going to have their guy, but Drake Jackson is a guy who can step in, loan behind Danielle Hunter, loan behind Za'Darius Smith, working Ed Donatel's scheme. And, to prevent injuries, I do think it would be smart if we can kind of cycle in Za'Darius Smith and Danielle Hunter. They're two guys that kind of have a concern behind them. So it would be nice if Drake Jackson could get in some situations to give those guys a little bit of a breather, to give those guys a little bit of a rest, so they can be fresh for the key moments at the end of the games. I think that the more guys chasing the quarterback, the better, in my opinion. This is where we start getting interested. This is where things start getting interesting because now it's the fourth round, and I don't know why, but my opinion on the draft is always like the fourth round is where team need almost goes completely out of the window, and now it's like, who do I think has the best chance of being a really good football player? And I'm looking at some of the things. Kobe Bryant is a name that I like a lot, and it's not just the Cincinnati thing. He legitimately, I do think, is a pretty good corner coming out of Cincinnati. I think it's really tough to be the number 2 guy behind Sauce Gardner because you're just getting every ball is coming your way almost because they're not going to throw at Sauce. They know that that's too dangerous. So Kobe Bryant is a guy who I think has been battle tested. Granted, not against SEC or Big Ten competition, but against occasionally Big Ten competition. But he's a guy that's he's been a really solid number 2 for Cincinnati for a few years. Jack, who are some of the guys that are standing out to you here? And please don't say the punter out of San Diego State.
Yeah, another Cincinnati Bearcat, Alec Pierce, the wide receiver, had a very solid pro day. I think he ran in the 4.3s or something. I wasn't fully expecting that. I watched a few Cincinnati Bearcat games this year, mainly because I was doing DraftKings and trying to stack Desmond Ridder with Alec Pierce, and it was a weird. I feel like that stack hit more often than not 2 years ago, and now that it's the year for all these guys to get drafted, they actually like the team got better, but the stacks weren't hitting as hard, which is kind of frustrating. But another one is Ridgeway out of Arkansas. He's another big boy up front. I think just getting some more depth along that defensive line. And I wanted to say something as well. The Vikings had a pretty solid sized group of players go to the Timberwolves game last night, and I was looking through the pictures. I forget how much of a like specimen Janarius Robinson is. He is like a full head above like Zadarius Smith. He's bigger than he is, and I was jacked when the Vikings took him, and he got put on the season on an IR. He's another pass rusher that I think with this Ed Donatel defense coming in, I think that benefits him in a pretty big way. I think he stood up a little bit more at Florida State, so I have high hopes for him going into year 2. I think Jalen Twyman was also just cleared to play for all football activities, which is also good news. I think the Vikings are starting to get some even more additional depth along that front 7. I think that's needed. Having said that, I don't think that there's quite enough depth, and getting a guy like Ridgeway here, I think would be a solid pick. But I think, like you said, just going best player available is never going to be the wrong option, especially when you're at this point in the draft. So I'd really be okay. I love Kobe Bryant as well. I'm with you on that. I think you could legitimately get 2 starting caliber corners out of this draft class alone with the Vikings or with us already taking Derek Stingley in the first round. And I think at some point, if it's not Kobe White here, it's going to be a Jack Jones or a Chase Lucas out of Arizona State, either one of those guys later on in this draft. You're going to have to get another body in that secondary and possibly at the safety position as well. But the board hasn't fallen for us to be aggressive at safety.
Yeah, it really hasn't. I'm gonna be honest with you. I like the Ridgeway pick a lot, and it's specifically because I'm not super familiar with Ridgeway, so I'm gonna let you kind of sell me on him. Is he more like Jalen Twyman, smaller pass rush guy, or is he beefy nose tackle?
He's a beefy nose tackle. I'm almost positive.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't replacing Jalen Twyman because
it's a guy, and I mean the Vikings' run defense was atrocious last year, even with Michael Pierce. I'm hoping that Harrison Phillips can come in and kind of take some of the pressure off that unit and get a better push, hopefully. But did any of those guys fall? Jack Jones is an intriguing option.
Kobe
right
Bryant
here.
fell.
Kobe Bryant's still there. That's the pick then, right there.
Yeah,
I didn't realize
agree.
that.
I'm going to really quickly just point out the bad boy of college football, Jack Jones. I've kind of spoke on him in our previous mock draft, talking about the fact that, he has had some off the field things, but when he plays like one of the best corners in football. It's just, it's an interesting risk the Vikings could take in the 5th, 6th round if they really wanted to. Let's go ahead. Let's really quickly review our picks so far. We've gotten Derek Stingley. What a selection at 12. Really good. We go with Quay Walker in the 2nd round, a guy who can step in. I definitely think he'll step in and probably be the number 3 linebacker. He might step in and end up being the number 2. It might be him and Kendricks kind of running things this year. Then we get Drake Jackson, the edge out of USC. Going to be more of a developmental guy because we do have Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter on the edge right now. But then we get John Ridgeway, just a big beefy boy. And then we get Kobe Bryant. And honestly, right now, like the way that Ridgeway Bryant thing went, I'm feeling pretty good about this later portion of the draft. I think Kobe Bryant's a guy who, all of a sudden, I start looking at our defensive backs. and I'm like, oh my God, are we deep? Are we deep at that position? We've got Pat Pete, we've got Derek Stingley, we've got Kobe Bryant, we've got Cam Danslow. Like, oh my God, like if Patrick Peterson gets injured, I don't think the season's over. Like, so the way this draft has played out so far, I'm a big fan of, but it's not over yet. We got 2 rounds to go, and we got 2 6th-round picks here, pretty close together.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, we're talking about the secondary and getting deep in the secondary. We just had a safety fall that I don't think should be on the board still at this point in the draft. Verone McKinley is my pick here if I have to pick one. I think it's between him and the interior offensive lineman out of Tennessee, but I think I'd lean McKinley. The Vikings have kind of, I don't want to say shored up by any means, because the interior of that offensive line still isn't great, but they've brought in more depth and pieces that I already have more faith going into the 2022 season than I did last season with
Right.
Ollie Udoh and Dakota Dozier. So I think you can kind of, he did just go, obviously.
I know. I took the pick and I was like, give your take. Tell me he's still there. I'll just make the pick and we won't even, like, I'll just let you talk until the 7th round and it'll be wonderful. But unfortunately, he did go 2 picks before us. Cade Mays is an interesting name. Did the Vikings have him in for a visit?
No, I don't know.
They had somebody.
I'm not saying no. I know they had. I think you might be getting the name mixed up with Cole Strange, the kid from
that might be what it is.
Chattanooga or some smaller
I think that
school.
is what it is. That is what it is. Well, now I feel foolish. Let me see.
I think you had a playmaker here. I don't know if there's. Zach Tom is a name that I've been watching. He's an offensive. I think he just went at 188. He's Wake Forest. I think he's versatile and he can play. I want to say I'm not 100% sure. Don't hold me to this, but I think he played both tackle and both guard positions throughout college. Like, he can kind of bounce around. I think having that versatility, I mean, it shows that the Vikings are trying to bring in more competition, and I like that. But the board hasn't fallen. I don't want to reach on a guard in the 2nd or 3rd round with the amount of defensive talent in this draft class. I'm not opposed to Reggie Robertson Jr. here out of SMU. He's more of a speedster. I think the Vikings have had solid luck. The wide receiver position is going to be one of the more interesting ones, I think, for this team heading into camp, because there's names and players that Vikings fans have completely forgotten about, with the stardom of Justin Jefferson, with Adam Thielen, obviously. KJ Osborne emerged into that wide receiver 3 role. I think Amir Smith is... Wow, that is a hard word to say when you haven't said it in a while. Amir Smith-Marset is going to carve himself out a little bit more of a role this year with his speed as well. We started to see it towards the end of last season. But then you have guys like Chad Beebe and there's another name that's escaping me, but BC Johnson. Like, there's some depth to that wide receiver room, but I don't think adding a little bit more speed hurts. And then another name that I think I wouldn't be opposed to is Cole Turner. Now is the time where I'd feel a little bit more comfortable addressing that tight end position. And I think the pick, it sounds kind of funny to say this, I think this would be the first offensive pick in the back end of the 6th round. But like we've said already on the last couple shows, the defensive class is absolutely loaded in this class. So I think it just makes a lot of sense to just overhaul the defense, get some of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's guys in the building, and kind of see if they can do a 1-year rebuild, mini rebuild, if you will, to that defense that was supposed to be solid last year with the Mike Zimmer at head coach. But I'm excited to see what the future is going to look like with all the change coming in with Ed Donatel and obviously Kevin O'Connell leading the way. But I think this could be warranted for the first offensive pick of the draft for us.
I definitely think we're going first offensive pick here, and I guarantee there are going to be some people that they see us go like 3 rounds deep without touching the offensive line, and they're like, these guys are idiots. These guys are the dumbest sacks of potatoes I've ever watched on
I'm already used to that.
Honestly.
Keep telling me, because it's not,
I took a lot of heat. You were talking about, like, you've been taking a lot of draft take heat. I took a lot of heat for having the wherewithal. I mean, I said the gall, not the wherewithal. I had the gall to say, yeah, the Vikings should entertain bringing Kyle Rudolph back on a very cheap deal. And everyone was like, I got like 3 people tweeting on the show's Twitter account about how that was awful. And it's like, I stand by that. They should bring Kyle Rudolph back. He's a good run-blocking tight end that's going to be able to learn the system. We know he's professional, and, we can try and make him Walter Payton Man of the Year again. But it doesn't mean that Irv Smith doesn't. Whatever. We don't need to talk about this. I'm going to let you make this pick.
Yeah, I didn't realize Justin Ross was still here as well. I think he's another solid late-round wide receiver that you can get. Isaac Taylor Stewart is another guy, and now you're starting to some people watching are like, why are you talking about guys that are never going to step on an NFL field? And that's why this time of year is so fun for us.
Yep.
These are the guys that I've been researching more, the guys in the top end or in the first and second round. But Taylor Stewart would certainly be a name worth monitoring here. I think best player available speaking, I think he might be towards the top of that list.
Yeah.
But the Vikings us in this mock draft for the Vikings have already taken 2 cornerbacks, so I don't think that makes a ton of sense. I think wide receiver is the play here, whether that's Justin Ross or Reggie Robertson. I think I'll let you pick between the two, but either one of those guys.
I picked between the two edges.
Let's go with Justin Ross. I'm okay with that. Get another guy out of Clemson. I don't know I think I know a little bit more about Reggie Robertson, but I'm either one at this point. It's a 6th round pick at this point, and we're just let's see who's going to be Mr. Irrelevant for the Vikings in 2022.
Yeah, a name that I'll bring up while this mock draft runs is, and I'll go ahead and find him down here, Jareth Stones out of Western Kentucky. Did some scouting on him whilst, looking at Bailey Zappi, my favorite player of all time, which I'm interested. I'm obviously not going to go through this mock draft and try and find him. But Bailey Zappi was a guy who I liked a lot. Smoke Monday, here's a name that I think is I've seen brought up by a couple of people that cover the Vikings. He's one of my favorite safeties in this class. If we didn't take McKinley out of Oregon, I would probably say Smoke Monday in this spot would be an almost no-brainer just for me. But Jareth Stones is a guy... sorry, I just wanted to finish this Jareth Stones take. I don't think he's like an elite athlete by any means, but his ability to learn and comprehend systems and just kind of play football smart, I do think is going to make similar role to like Adam Thielen. It's like I think if he does get to a team that gives him a look and gives him a shot, he will. I think he could end up being a pretty solid contributing offensive piece. But that's my Jareth Stones take. What were you gonna come up with?
I was gonna say, if you want to add more depth to that secondary, be my guest. I think that's the biggest area of weakness for this team. I mean, right now, his 2 starters are Harrison Smith and Cameron Bynum. I know we drafted Mikael Wright, but having said that, I mean, if those guys get hurt, we're looking at Miles Dorn and I'm spacing on. He's number 44. He played at Michigan. I'm spacing on the name though.
I'm also
Metellus, Josh Metellus.
Oh,
I don't know why that name escaped me for a sec. But if Cameron Bynum or Harrison Smith get hurt, it's Miles Dorn or Metellus stepping in, and I don't know if that's good enough. So bringing in another player that you're saying you think is probably the best player available on the board right now to compete at that position, I don't think I have any issue with that, and I think it's a good way to close out the draft.
So a Smoke Monday is going to be the pick. Just really quickly, I am going to throw out Ben Brown as a guy who I like, interior offensive lineman from Ole Miss. That's a name that I like. I do like to kind of grab here, with the 7th round pick.
If you want to take him, we haven't taken an offensive lineman, and maybe this will prevent some of the riots from happening.
We are going to take Ben Brown out of Ole Miss. And the offensive line, similar to what Rick Spielman did for a few years there. We took one in the 7th. We took one late. It's fixed, okay? We're good now. Everything is fine. So we're going to look at the user pick. So we traded back only once, and it was in the 2nd round, not the 1st round. So we moved back to pick up a 4th round pick, and we gave up one of the 6ths to do it. So now we can look at our picks here, and I think this is I'm happy with this draft personally. I got 2 of my favorite guys that are in this draft. And I think that, Derek Stingley Jr., while he is not my favorite guy in this draft, he's one of those guys that I think I might just be worn out on because I've been hearing how good he is for like 5 years now. And after a while, you kind of become desensitized to it. And it's like, yeah, Derek Stingley's good. I get it. Have you seen Sauce Gardner's tape? He hasn't given up a touchdown since high school. So, I think that's playing in a little bit. But, Jack, what are your thoughts on this mock draft?
Yeah, overall, I really like it. I do think there are some certain spots where if a wide receiver or an offensive lineman were to fall, I don't think the tackle position is necessarily a position that's worth monitoring, but there's so much talent at the top end
Yeah.
of the draft that if one were to fall, it wouldn't make sense to reach on a tackle. But I've seen some situations where a guy like Evan Neal somehow falls to the Vikings at 12. I don't think that is realistic in any way. I don't think it'll happen, but is something worth monitoring.
Yeah,
I'm
I
aware
kind
of
of want
this.
to.
You're aware of this. We did not draft offensive line early. We completely overhauled the defense. There's a lot of talent coming into next year's class at the quarterback position. This has been labeled as more of a weaker draft class with a lot more defensive talent than offensive talent, and I think that works in the Vikings' favor,
Yeah.
as you can see how we just did this mock draft. But I think it works in the Vikings' favor because, as I've said before, there's a lack of starters in some instances along this defense right now, and then you can debate that, but you can't debate that there's a complete lack of depth on the defense, and they need to completely overhaul that. There's guys that were Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman guys that were taken within the last 2 years that really haven't turned into anything like they were
Yeah.
allegedly supposed to. So having Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah overhaul that defense, I think would be a huge win for the Vikings. And I'm not going to sit here. We're going to do another mock draft next week, and this could or Jordan and I trade back and draft Chris Olave in the low 20s. I wouldn't be opposed to that either. That's what makes this so much
With
fun. Is there's so many different ways that this team could go.
With how deep this class is on defense too. I mean, like legitimately, I'm talking about like when did we get Kobe Bryant? What pick was this? It was 156. I'm looking at this pick 156 and I'm like, holy cow, this guy could like I think this guy has the potential to like stout next year. Like he could I wouldn't be offended if the Vikings rolled him out to stout next year. I probably would because Patrick Peterson and Derek Stingley are on this team, but like, whatever. Like it's so deep. I almost want to do a mock draft where we take a wide receiver in the first round and maybe we don't even move down to do it. Maybe we take one of the top wide, maybe we take a Garrett Wilson, maybe we move down and we take Jamison Yell, but like when he comes back, that speed is undeniable, and we're getting somebody that's just special. I do want to do one thing here. I kind of want to go to like some of our picks and just look at the picks around it, specifically in front of it, and decide if we really would have changed anything. And I think the second round is the best example. I don't think we take Quay Walker if George Pickens falls one more spot to us. I think we both unanimously agree we would have taken George Pickens because we both really like him, and we would have went defense, offense, and then a bunch of defense, and then offense again. So, I mean, just one spot like that, that's kind of how much things can change. Pickens is a guy I know we both like. What was it in the third? In the third, it was Drake Jackson. I don't think there was anybody really there that we would have taken. But, it's that kind of thing. Well, I just think it's definitely neat, and it's always worth looking at who went right before you picked that you almost had, and kind of thinking, okay, well, if that's the range where they're going to be, that's also a guy who's in consideration. So I don't know. I like this mock draft a lot. I know it doesn't have Josh Pascal in it, and that's kind of my benchmark for a mock draft, but I think we made up for it with some pretty solid picks. But other than that, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna make us big. All right, we're big. And now that our faces are back on screen, Jack, I'm going to once again remind everybody to tune in next week for a big announcement from Load the Box, not just Vikings, but as a whole. Hopefully, we have a few big announcements coming up for you throughout the summer. And follow the show. It's going across the thing right now. Follow the show on Twitter. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and make sure you have liked the Facebook, so that way you're getting all of the content that's coming out through there. Jack, I'm gonna let you go ahead, plug yourself, do all of that stuff. Make sure. By the way, the show's Twitter is @LTB Vikings. I don't put it in the scrolly because the @ for this font looks all messed up, and I can't change it, so it's like a whole thing. But follow Jack on Twitter at Jack_H_day. He is constantly just producing top tier quality articles on the draft during the season. He's, A plus content out of Jack all the time, including here on this show. Jack, I'm going to go ahead and shut up. I'm going to pass it over to you to kind of get me hyped up and best you can. I know the Timberwolves won, but the Reds got blown out last night, so I'm off to a bumpy start to baseball season, and I need some encouragement here, so I'll pass it off to you to get us out of here.
Yeah, the only encouragement that I think both of you, it's music to both of our ears, is the draft is legit 2 weeks away from tomorrow. And I think that it kind of snuck up on us this year because we weren't probably quite as active. Just things got busy, but I'm looking forward to completely diving into that. And maybe we can talk about some other stuff. Maybe we'll have some like post first round reactions or something along those lines, or we do hell, maybe we do the first ever LTB. I'm saying stuff without even clearing this with Jordan, by the way. I didn't
No,
even
that's
say
fine.
anything
That's
to
fine.
him.
Just throw things
Maybe
into
we
the
have like
atmosphere.
the first ever LTB happy hour. There's some things in the works that I think Jordan and I can discuss behind the scenes. But as we get close to the draft, I think you'll see the Twitter is going to get a lot more active. We're going to be a lot more active doing mock drafts. I think the next couple weeks will both be mock drafts, obviously. And I think next week will probably be the week that Jordan and I kind of have a little bit more fun with this and maybe go a little bit more outside the box. And then dial in that Wednesday leading up to the draft and say, you know what, let's kind of tighten things up and see how the board falls and really attack this how we think Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah is going to attack things. So we'll have more of a fun one and more of a serious one to wrap up before the draft. And then I'm sure whether it's the night of, the weekend of, or even just the following Wednesday, there will be plenty of reactions to all of the Vikings picks. We'll probably go in depth on each one at some point as well. So make sure you're following the show on Twitter, on YouTube, anywhere that you can follow the show. Make sure you're doing so because it's going to be a fun couple weeks. And most importantly, Skol as always.